My family wants me to cancel my wedding date so my sister can get married first. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and my fiancé and I have been engaged for around 18 months. We've been together for years, and we always intended to tie the knot next spring. We've already secured the venue, paid the deposit for the catering, and hired a photographer. All the major arrangements are complete. So I thought we could finally relax and enjoy counting down to our big day. But then everything turned upside down. To give some background, my family is large and pretty close-knit, with a lot of traditions, and weddings are especially important to us. My sister, who's 25, recently got engaged, and while I'm genuinely happy for her, she's been struggling with her wedding planning. Her biggest problem is finding a venue for her desired date, which is where all the drama began. She's been openly envious of the venue we chose. Every time she talks about it, she calls it perfect and mentions how her fiancé's family can't afford something similar. I didn't pay much attention at first. Lots of people experience venue envy when planning weddings, right? But I didn't realize just how deep her envy ran until a family dinner a couple of weeks ago. We were all sitting down for a typical meal when my mom started making this awkward speech about how great it would be if my sister could use our venue. I was halfway through taking a bite, thinking it had to be a joke, but she kept going. She talked about how my sister was younger and how, since her fiancé's in the military, there's a chance he might be deployed soon. To my mom, it made perfect sense for my sister to get married first, and she suggested we move our wedding date so my sister could have the venue. I was still processing this because my fiancé and I had this date locked in for over a year, and everything was already paid for. Yet, my mom was completely serious, and my sister sat there, nodding like it was a done deal. My fiancé was livid, and I couldn't blame her. The whole thing was utterly absurd. She didn't say a word during dinner, but her look said it all. Don't even think about considering this. I calmly but firmly told my mom and sister that we wouldn't be changing our wedding plans. Naturally, my sister burst into tears, sobbing dramatically at the table before storming out, with my mom following her, shooting us the most disappointed look I'd ever seen. The rest of the dinner was painfully awkward, with my parents looking uncomfortable but staying mostly quiet. I thought that might be the end of it. Maybe my sister would calm down, realize how unreasonable the request was, and we could all move forward. But I was wrong. The next day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, you name it, all from various family members, urging me to put family first and be the bigger person. My mom must have spoken to them, as they were all acting like it was a small favor, as if we could just wave a magic wand and change everything about our wedding. Some messages even tried to guilt trip me, saying it was just a tiny sacrifice for the sake of family harmony, as if rearranging an entire wedding was no big deal. My mom called, emphasizing how weddings are meant to bring families together, not tear them apart, and how my grandmother would be heartbroken if the family couldn't come together for such an important occasion. Meanwhile, I stared at my phone, feeling like I was in some bizarre reality. My fiancé was furious about all of this, and she didn't want me to even consider these conversations, and I agreed. It's our wedding, and we put in a lot of effort to make it perfect for us. Feeling overwhelmed, I did what many do in the digital age. I turned to Reddit. I posted about the situation, asking if I was being unreasonable for refusing to change our wedding date. I half expected people to say, "Family comes first, maybe you should consider it," but the response was overwhelming. The post blew up, and people were outraged on my behalf, telling me to stand my ground and not give in to this outrageous demand. The support from Reddit made me realize just how absurd the situation was. Then my sister sent me an ultimatum: either I give up the date, or she wouldn't attend our wedding and would make sure the rest of the family skipped it too. I didn't think things could get any worse, but now it felt like my whole family was turning against me just because I wouldn't let my sister take over our wedding. At this point, I wasn't sure what to do. I was trying to stay calm and not let this ruin our excitement, but the pressure was mounting. My fiancé and I were on the same page. Nothing would change, but with my family laying on the guilt and my sister practically threatening to sabotage everything, it felt like this was only the beginning of a much bigger conflict. Update 1: the next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing constantly on my nightstand. Half asleep, I reached over, assuming it might be work or some random spam call, but it was more messages from family, texts, missed calls, all of it. This time, my grandmother was leading the charge, urging me to do what she thought was right and keep the family together. It seemed like they all got the same message overnight, because suddenly everyone was pushing the idea that I should just give up our wedding date like it was a small favor. The guilt trip was intense, and I could feel the pressure building. By mid-morning, I was trying to brush it off, but then my parents showed up at our place without warning. They looked serious, and I knew this wouldn't be a casual visit. My fiancé and I let them in, and immediately, they launched into this big speech about family traditions. My dad talked about how, in our family, it's customary for the younger sibling to marry first if they're ready. My mom was more emotional, saying how devastated the family was and how worried she was that this situation could create a permanent rift. It was heavy. My fiancée wasn't backing down, she stood firm, calmly explaining that we weren't going to change our wedding date. She reiterated that everything had already been booked, paid for, and planned, and that changing anything now would cost us thousands of dollars, not to mention the inconvenience. My parents seemed shocked, like they hadn't expected her to be so direct. Then, suddenly, my mom broke down, crying as she pleaded with me to reconsider. It was painful to see her so upset, and for a moment, I felt conflicted, but I also knew this was an impossible situation. Changing our wedding plans just to please everyone wasn't fair to either of us. I could barely react before my younger brother, who's 22, spoke up. Normally he stays out of family conflicts, but this time he sided with me. He told our parents they were being unreasonable and insisted I should do whatever made me happy. He even offered to act as my security at the wedding if the family drama got out of control. My parents didn't really know how to handle that, so they left, still upset but perhaps realizing they wouldn't change my mind. Later that day, things took an even messier turn. My sister took to Facebook and posted one of those passive-aggressive updates, hinting about how some people can be so selfish and expressing her disappointment in those she expected support from during a tough time. It was clearly directed at me, but the worst part was seeing how many family members were liking and commenting on it. More drama, more fuel to the fire. Then my mom called, and this time she wasn't holding back. She bluntly accused me of ruining her daughter's wedding dreams, mentioning that my sister was now considering eloping due to the stress of everything. It seemed like every discussion with them was another layer of guilt, but I wasn't budging. My fiancé and I had already decided that nothing was going to change, and my mom ended the call still fuming. At that point, my fiancé suggested that we limit contact with the family for a while, and she was right. The constant calls, messages, and social media drama were draining us both. So, we agreed to distance ourselves from family interactions until after the wedding and focus on each other instead. I even reached out to our wedding planner to see if there was any chance of my sister using the venue on a different weekend, hoping to ease the tension, but it wasn't possible. The planner explained that the venue was fully booked for months, so that option was off the table. Feeling exhausted, my fiancé and I decided to take a break from it all and planned a weekend getaway, just the two of us, with no drama, no family, and no wedding talk. It was exactly what we needed to clear our minds and regain some calm. Meanwhile, my sister's fiancé messaged me, apologizing for all the drama. He seemed genuinely embarrassed and mentioned that he'd tried talking to her, but nothing seemed to help. I appreciated his apology, but it didn't change the fact that my sister and mom were still in full-blown meltdown mode. As if things couldn't get more chaotic, the family group chat erupted with arguments. Relatives were picking sides. Some supported me, saying the whole situation was unreasonable, while others called me selfish for not following family traditions. It turned into a full-scale family conflict, with people I hadn't heard from in months suddenly chiming in. It became too much to handle, so I booked a session with my therapist to help process the guilt and pressure. On Reddit, support continued to pour in from strangers, encouraging me to stand firm and cut ties with anyone being toxic. They weren't wrong. I started to realize how much I had been bending over backward to accommodate my family. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to let this mess overshadow our wedding. It was meant to be about my fiancé and me, and it was time to focus on that. Update 2: a few days after we decided to go low contact with my family, things escalated dramatically. My sister had what I can only describe as a complete meltdown. I woke up to an enormous text message from her about 10 paragraphs long, accusing me of ruining her life and blaming me for ruining her wedding plans. She went on about how she had been dreaming of her ideal wedding since she was a little girl, and how I was now destroying that dream by not giving up our venue. She pulled out every guilt trip she could think of, saying I should act my age and be more mature, and that she needed the venue more because her fiancé might soon be deployed. It was completely over the top and draining to read, but I chose not to reply. I figured engaging would only make the situation worse. Apparently, that wasn't enough for my sister. She went further by calling my parents and giving them an ultimatum: either I give up the wedding date or she would cut off contact with them. My mom called me afterward, and I could hear the tension in her voice as she tried to stay calm, but it was clear she was struggling. She talked about how heartbroken she was that the family was being torn apart over this and pleaded with me one last time to reconsider. I told her my decision stood, and although she didn't say it, I sensed she finally understood that this wasn't going to change. Meanwhile, my fiancé and I had to start sending out wedding invitations, but the family tension made it hard to enjoy. What should have been a fun part of the process felt like we were walking on eggshells, worried about how each name on the guest list might bring more drama. Just when things couldn't get any more tense, the family group chat erupted again. This time, an uncle stepped in to defend my sister, saying that family should always come first and that I should let her have the date. More relatives joined the argument, turning it into another back and forth filled with accusations and passive-aggressive remarks. It felt like witnessing a car crash in slow motion, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But then something unexpected happened. My older cousin, who's 31 and usually stays out of family conflicts, decided to intervene. She sent a message to the group chat, calling the whole situation absurd and pointing out that my sister had a long history of seeking attention. She pretty much called out the entire family for enabling her behavior, which honestly felt like a breath of fresh air. The chat went silent after her message, and I quietly hoped that this would finally bring an end to the drama. Of course, it didn't end there. A few days later, I found out that my sister had tried to book the same venue for the weekend before our wedding. She went behind our backs to secure it, but luckily it was already reserved for another event, so her plan didn't work out. The venue staff must have anticipated trouble because they reached out to inform me about what had happened. While I wasn't surprised, I was definitely irritated. To make things even worse, her fiancé contacted me again, offering another round of sincere apologies. He mentioned that he had done everything he could to get her to move on, but she simply refused to let it go. He was clearly embarrassed, and I actually felt some sympathy for him. It seemed like he was stuck in the middle of this entire mess too. Then, in an unexpected turn of events, my parents finally came around after they heard about my sister's latest stunt with the venue. They told me that sticking to my original plans was the right move. It was a relief to finally have their support, but they still encouraged me to keep the peace with the rest of the family, which was far easier said than done. By then, my fiancé and I had reached our limit. We decided to cut off all contact with my sister and her immediate family until after the wedding. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. The stress and drama were simply too much, and we needed to focus on making our wedding day everything we envisioned. My fiancé's parents, who had been watching all of this unfold from a distance, worried that the drama might overshadow our wedding, but they fully supported our decision to cut ties. They reassured us that no matter what happened, they would stand by us, and having their unwavering support meant a lot. Meanwhile, Reddit continued to rally behind us. With each update I shared, more people told their own stories of family drama, encouraging us to stay strong and distance ourselves from anyone toxic. The support from the online community was honestly one of the few things that kept me grounded during this whole ordeal. In therapy, I worked through the feelings of guilt and pressure, and my therapist reminded me to maintain clear boundaries. She encouraged me to focus on my own happiness and not to let other people's expectations ruin this special time. But then came the breaking point during my fiancé's dress fitting. I received an emotional voicemail from my grandmother. She was pleading with me to make amends with my sister, saying she didn't want to see the family torn apart. It was hard to hear, and I could see it affecting my fiancé too. But despite everything, we were determined not to let the drama overshadow our big day. With my fiancé's constant support, we resolved to push forward with our plans. No matter what, we would make our wedding about us and the love we shared, not about the family conflict that kept trying to overshadow it. Update 3. About a week after deciding to go no contact with my sister and her close family, things somehow managed to escalate even more. Early one morning, I got a call from the manager at our wedding venue, and I immediately sensed that something was wrong. The manager explained that someone had called, pretending to be me, in an attempt to cancel our venue reservation. Fortunately, the staff noticed the suspicious nature of the request and didn't proceed with it. But the realization that someone had tried to sabotage our wedding hit me hard. It didn't take long to figure out who was behind it. The manager provided the date and time of the call, and everything lined up perfectly, it had to be my sister. No one else would have gone to such lengths or acted with such pettiness. When I told my fiancée what had happened, she was furious and immediately wanted to involve the police. She was right, it was a case of impersonation, and attempting to cancel our wedding venue crossed a serious line. But I hesitated, knowing that filing a police report would take the drama to an entirely new level, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face the backlash from the family. Still, we understood the need to protect ourselves, so we kept that option open. The most painful part of all this was the silence from my family after the sabotage attempt. I expected anyone to call out my sister for her actions, but not a single relative spoke up. Not my aunt, not my cousins, not even those who had supported me earlier. It felt like they were all pretending nothing had happened, and that silence cut deeper than the actual act of sabotage. It seemed like my family was choosing to ignore her behavior entirely. When I told my parents about the attempted cancellation, they were outraged. My dad, who is usually calm and composed, immediately called my aunt to confront her. This led to a huge argument at a family gathering later that week. My parents demanded answers, but my aunt, in her usual manner, tried to downplay everything. She said my sister was just emotional and didn't mean any harm, calling it a reaction to all the stress she was under. There was no apology, no taking responsibility, just excuses. Naturally, this set off another round of chaos in the family group chat. Relatives started choosing sides again, with some continuing to defend my sister, echoing my aunt's words, saying things like, "She's just stressed, it's wedding drama, she didn't mean it." But others, thankfully, were appalled by her actions, with a few privately messaging me, expressing disbelief over how low she had stooped. As for my sister, she finally sent me a text message. It wasn't much of an apology, though. She said she had acted out of stress and hoped we could move on from this. It was infuriating. After all the Facebook drama, her attempt to take over the venue, and now this sabotage, her half-hearted apology felt like a slap in the face. She made no mention of what she had actually done or any real acknowledgement of the harm she'd caused. I decided I'd had enough. I posted an update on Reddit explaining the sabotage attempt and how my sister had impersonated me to try and cancel our booking. The response was overwhelming. The post went viral again, with thousands of comments pouring in. People were outraged, calling out my sister's toxic behavior and advising me to cut ties permanently. Many even suggested filing a police report and taking legal action to protect myself. All of this was taking a toll on my fiancée. She grew increasingly upset about how the drama was overshadowing our wedding planning. What should have been a joyful time for us felt more like constantly dealing with crises. She was right, this was adding stress we didn't need during what should have been a happy chapter in our lives. Even our wedding planner stepped in with a caution, advising us to proceed carefully, especially when involving family. She suggested hiring additional security for the wedding day, just to be safe. That was the last thing we wanted to hear, but given the circumstances, it seemed like a wise precaution. After discussing it with my fiancé and close friends, we decided to go completely no contact with my sister and aunt until after the wedding. There was no way to maintain a relationship with them without inviting more tension. It was a difficult decision, but it felt like our only choice. Of course, my aunt had more to say. She delivered one final ultimatum: if I didn't reconcile with my sister, she and my sister would ensure that a large part of the family boycotted the wedding. I didn't even bother responding. It seemed like another manipulative, empty threat, and I wasn't going to let them pressure me into giving in. Ultimately, we decided to file a police report, wanting to have everything documented in case anything else occurred. It wasn't about pressing charges, but about protecting ourselves and ensuring we had legal backup. Making that decision lifted a significant burden off our shoulders. Despite the ongoing chaos, my fiancé and I moved ahead with our wedding plans. We arranged for extra security, finalized our guest list, and chose to focus on those who genuinely supported us. It wasn't going to be the perfect family wedding we had once imagined, but we refused to let my sister ruin our special day. This was our wedding, and we intended to make it memorable, no matter the obstacles. Update 4. The boycott wasn't just a hollow threat. My sister followed through, convincing a good portion of the family not to attend the wedding. Several aunts, uncles, and cousins, who I had thought would be there, either sent messages declining or just went silent altogether. It was strange to see so many RSVPs turn to no, knowing they had been swayed by her manipulative efforts. It wasn't as simple as a sorry, I can't make it. It was clear that they had taken a side, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. My parents struggled with it the most. They had been fully supportive of our decision to stick to our wedding plans, but it pained them to see the family split like this. They tried persuading a few relatives to change their minds, but most of them wouldn't budge. It was as if they had drawn a line in the sand, and nothing could shift their stance. By the time our wedding rehearsal rolled around, the tension was palpable. The absence of those family members was glaring, casting a heavy shadow over the evening. Thankfully, my fiancé's family stood by us unwaveringly. They had watched this entire drama unfold from the sidelines, and while they were concerned about its impact on our wedding day, they were there for us completely. Their steady presence and calm support helped to ease the tension, though the rift in the family lingered in the background. Luckily, our close friends stepped up in a big way. Many of the roles that family members were supposed to fill, like helping with setup and coordination, were quickly taken over by our friends. They rallied around us, ensuring everything went smoothly. Honestly, I don't know how we would have managed without them. They kept the atmosphere light, which helped us focus on the joy of getting married. Meanwhile, my sister had shifted gears, posting nonstop on social media about her own wedding plans. It seemed like she was trying to divert attention from our wedding by highlighting hers. The timing wasn't accidental, it felt like a calculated move to shift the spotlight to herself. Then, things took another turn. A friend of mine, who still had connections with some of my sister's friends, sent me screenshots of private messages between them. In those messages, my sister admitted that she wanted to ruin our wedding out of pure jealousy, even boasting about how successful she had been in getting people to boycott. The messages were harsh and painted her in a terrible light, and seeing her true intentions laid out so clearly was a punch to the gut. Those screenshots didn't stay private for long. They began circulating among our family, sparking a social media clash. Some relatives rushed to her defense, claiming she was just young and emotional, acting out under stress. But others were appalled. A few who had initially sided with her even reached out to apologize and offered to attend the wedding, though it felt too late to mend those bridges. I updated my Reddit post with the leaked messages, and as expected, the response was intense. The post blew up again, with thousands of comments pouring in. People were outraged by her behavior and continued to encourage me to stay no contact with anyone who defended her. As tempting as it was to follow that advice, I knew I needed to focus on the wedding itself. I wasn't going to let this chaos consume any more of my energy. My therapist's advice echoed the same sentiment. She urged me to concentrate on the joy of the wedding and not let toxic family members overshadow it. The decision to go no contact felt more and more right with each passing day. As the wedding approached, my fiancé's family provided even more support, both emotionally and practically. They filled in the gaps left by the relatives who were boycotting, ensuring everything was in order and surrounding us with love, not conflict. Given all the attempts at sabotage, we chose to bring in additional security for the wedding day. It wasn't something we ever imagined needing, but with everything that had unfolded, we knew it was better to be safe than sorry. The last thing we wanted was for my sister to try another last-minute move to ruin our big day. When our wedding day finally arrived, it came with a mix of excitement and anxiety. We were both a little on edge, worried that there might be interference from my sister or the boycotting relatives. But as the ceremony began, all those concerns began to fade away. The people who truly cared about us were there, and that was what mattered. While the absence of several family members was noticeable, it surprisingly didn't dampen the atmosphere. Instead, we focused on the love and support from those who chose to be there. We had a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family members who genuinely wanted to celebrate with us. As the day continued, all the drama seemed to melt into the background. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and unforgettable moments. In the days that followed, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The wedding was a triumph, going off without a single issue, but I also understood that some family relationships were beyond repair. There was no returning to what we had before, and I had made peace with that. Those who truly mattered had been there for us, and in the end, that's what counted. We weathered the storm, and now we could finally move on, leaving the family conflict behind. Update 5: a few months after our wedding, my sister's big day was approaching, and I started hearing whispers that things weren't going smoothly on her end. Rumors spread about vendors canceling at the last moment, and it seemed like she was facing significant financial troubles. Family members were gossiping, but no one wanted to address it directly with her, likely due to the sensitive nature of the situation. I kept my distance, not wanting to get involved, but soon things reached a breaking point. Just a week before her wedding, the bombshell dropped: her wedding venue canceled on her. There was an issue with her reservation, and the venue had double booked for the same date. When I learned this, I couldn't help but feel a slight sense of karmic justice. After everything she had tried to do to disrupt our wedding, this seemed like fate giving her a taste of her own medicine. I wasn't celebrating her misfortune, but I can't say I was shocked. You can only put out so much negativity before it catches up with you. Then, the inevitable happened. My aunt contacted me in a full-blown panic, begging me to help save my sister's wedding. She pleaded, reminding me that I was family, and surely I could use my connections to secure a new venue for her on such short notice. The sheer nerve of it left me stunned. After all the chaos, sabotage attempts, and the family turning against me, they expected me to come to the rescue. I wasn't having it. I firmly but politely told my aunt that I couldn't help, and frankly, didn't want to. After everything they put us through, I wasn't about to sacrifice my well-being for them. My fiancé fully supported my stance, and together, we decided that we were done with that kind of toxic behavior. No more bending over backward to make others happy, especially those who had tried to ruin our wedding. As expected, the backlash came quickly. My aunt and sister rallied the family against me once more, calling me heartless and selfish for not stepping in to help. Some relatives reached out, trying to guilt me into changing my mind, but this time I was stronger. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. I stood my ground and ignored the drama. When my sister's wedding day finally came, it ended up being a scaled-down, disorganized event. She managed to pull something together at the last minute, but it was far from the grand celebration she had been boasting about. Most of the relatives who had boycotted my wedding attended hers, but the tension was obvious, and it cast a shadow over the day. I didn't attend, of course, but from what I heard, the entire affair felt strained, as if no one really wanted to be there. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding she had envisioned, and honestly, it seemed like she got what she deserved. Afterward, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened with my family. It was sad to acknowledge that some relationships were beyond repair, but I didn't regret standing up for myself and my fiancé. I had learned a great deal about setting boundaries and refusing to let toxic individuals dictate my life. My fiancé reassured me that we had made the right choices, and our wedding day had been perfect because it focused on us, not on the drama. I posted a final update on Reddit to thank everyone for their support throughout this wild ride. The community had been a lifeline during the toughest times, and I wanted to share how we were moving forward. I expressed my gratitude for all the advice and encouragement and shared that we were ready to close this chapter and focus on our future together. The response was incredible, with hundreds of comments cheering us on as we moved beyond the family chaos. Months later, I received another apology from my sister, and this time it seemed more genuine. She admitted that jealousy and stress had driven her actions and expressed remorse for how everything unfolded. But even with her apology, I chose to maintain my distance. Some wounds run too deep to heal quickly, and I knew letting her back into my life would only bring more turmoil. I was done with that. The family remained divided. Some relatives still held resentment toward me for not keeping the peace, while others had come around and now saw my sister for who she truly was. It's a strange reality, knowing that some family members might never forgive me, but I've accepted it. You can't make everyone happy, and I'm done trying. Throughout it all, my bond with my close friends only grew stronger. They stood by me through every crisis, every twist in this saga, showing me what genuine support looks like. I am deeply grateful for those who stayed by our side through all the ups and downs. Looking back, I have no regrets about how I handled the situation. I'm proud of the boundaries we established and the lessons I learned about managing toxic family dynamics. It was a challenging journey, but it has made me stronger. Now, my fiancé and I are looking ahead, planning the next phase of our lives together, building a future grounded in love, respect, and most importantly, peace. The family drama may never fully disappear, but we're ready to move forward without letting it weigh us down. As I close this chapter on Reddit, I want to thank the community once more for guiding me through one of the hardest periods of my life. Without your support, I'm not sure I would have been able to stand firm like I did, but now we're moving on, and it feels empowering. Here's to new beginnings drama-free.